Right, hi guys. Um this has definitely had to be pre-recorded because something's come up this afternoon. Okay, so let's talk about the guides on your sewing machine. Now everybody's guides could be different. Some will only have a few markings on this side and some will have quite a lot of these markings here. Now let me just take off my walking foot. Doing this around a camera, so just bear with me. Excuse the chipped nail varnish. Oops, knocked you. Sorry. Right, okay. So my needle is in the center here and I've got my zigzag plate on. So to know this is a zigzag plate is it should have a half moon shape here. These are what are called your feed dogs. These are what anchor onto your fabric to help feed it through your sewing machine when it sews. Okay, so I have got on here, and this is a really good plate to demonstrate on. I've got vertical lines on the top, and this is all inches at the top here. So these ones here are all inches. Then I've got these vertical lines, which are centimeters. So millimeters, sorry. I always get millimeters and centimeters mixed up. So these are all millimeters. These horizontal lines here and 45-degree angles and 60 and 120. These are all what I just basically said. They're degrees. So it means that you can, when you're quilting, it means that you can do 45-degree angle quilt lines. So these numbers here represent when you've got your fabric and you're sewing through it. If you hold it up, your edge of your fabric up to here, you are doing 1.5 inches wide seam. So from here to here is 1.5 inch seam. So for instance, we do a lot of 3/8 of an inch seam. So there is no guide in here because the first mark is 100, half an inch. So on some machines, the markings which are not mentioned before the half inch are mentioned on here. So we do a lot of 3/8 of an inch. So your fabric will be right next up to this 3/8 of an inch. I will be demonstrating this. Now you've got some horizontal lines here as well. And these horizontal lines are if you have to pivot. So for instance, we're doing 3/8 of an inch, or say let's do 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So the 1/4 of an inch, we will sew on this marking here, sew along, and then when the tip, the point of my 1/4 of an inch hits this mark, which is the 1/4 of an inch, so that's this horizontal line here, it means that I am 1/4 of an inch away from pivoting. So I would stop my needle once my seam comes to here and pivot the fabric. Now I will be demonstrating that as well. Right, so I've got my walking foot back on, and I'm going to show you how these lines work. So for instance, I've got my needle set in the center position. So if we are doing 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which we mainly do in this group because we do a lot of bag making. You see the edge of my fabric here? I'm lining it right up next to that 3/8 of an inch mark in here. And then I'll put that underneath my foot, drop my foot, and I will sew. Now, I'm running out of bobbins, so it might keep beeping. So when I'm actually sewing, my edge of my fabric is right next to that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, if you are American or you are European in the EU, you might want to use a 1 centimeter. So that's what the 10 is underneath. That's 10 millimeters. You've got guides here, here, and here for doing 3/8 of an inch seam allowance or 1 centimeter seam allowance. So as you can see, I'm keeping 1 centimetre seam allowance. Let me just cut that. Okay, and it's kept a perfectly neat 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance. And the 1/4 of an inch is the actual marking before the 3/8 of an inch. So let's do 1/4 of an inch. So this is now doing me 1/4 of an inch. I'm keeping my eye here. I'm not looking at the needle, guys. I'm looking here to make sure I don't move. I'm not forcing my fabric through. I'm just resting my fingers on top and letting the feed dogs that I pointed out earlier on, which are underneath. And because I got my walking foot, there's some feed dogs here. That is on here. I'm just letting that do all the guiding through. I'm not forcing it through. I'm just holding it so lightly. That's when you have perfect top stitching, by the way, guys. And keeping a steady speed that you are comfortable at. So that is 1/4 of an inch. So if we were doing 1.5 inches, let's go for 1.5. So this is the 1.5 inch mark. So that's 1.5 inches there. So because my fabric doesn't go all the way up to there at the start, use a line that you can kind of work out where the 1.5 inches. So this line down here is the 1.5 inches. So use that as your starting off guide, and then once you've get sewing, put your seam up to next to the 1.5 inch marking. Oh, sorry, keep knocking the camera. So let's just do 1.5 inches. So that is 1.5 inches, and that's kept it perfectly neat because I kept my seam right next to that line, and that's 1.5 inches. Now let's do a pivot. Right, so I'm making sure my needle position stays down. So we're going to do, let's say 3/8 of an inch. Right, so on here, on the horizontal lines, that's these lines going across here, there is no 3/8 of an inch mentioned. And there's a reason for that, is because we know that's also called the 10. So we're going to go to the 10 here. So I'm going to sew from the start, and when I get to the end here, this edge here will match up to this line here. So let's do 3/8 of an inch. Let's turn this around. So we're doing 3/8 of an inch. I'm sewing on the selvage here, sorry guys. So I'm doing 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to adjust my foot. Okay, so I'm watching this edge here that's coming into the picture at the moment. This edge here. When this edge here marries up with this straight edge, so that's in line with that, I know my needle has stopped away from this edge 3/8 of an inch. Because my foot automatically lifts up with my needle down, I can twist that round, and as you can see, this edge matches up with the 3/8 of an inch here, and that gives me a perfect 3/8 of an inch pivot on a corner. Okay. So sorry guys, I've got a chest infection. Okay, so that's how the horizontal lines work. So that's like 1/4 of an inch and 10, which is 3/8 of an inch. Right, okay, so we're going to talk about these now. So when you make bias binding, or you're doing point-to-point quilting on, once you finish your sandwich of your quilt, you might want to do 45-degree angle quilting. So this is where this comes into effect, or you might want to do 60-degree quilting, totally up to you. So you would start off your quilt with your quilt edge, or it doesn't have to be a quilt, I'm just saying it doesn't have to be. And as you can see, I've got it at a 60-degree angle here. And this is a guide to help you to start off with your quilting. So for instance, I've got it on the 60-degree. And then that point at the top here should stay on the 60-degree if you aren't pushing this through. And then this edge here, if you've kept 60 degrees, will keep 60 degrees. I was just marginally off there, but that's how you know you've kept 60 degrees. So let's just do the 45-degree one. So the 45-degree one is this solid line here. So, oh, don't want to knock the camera. So remember that edge this point should come out on the 45-degree angle marking. And there's a 45-degree angle marking. Let's do one more stitch. And as you can see, that is lined with the 45-degree angle. Right, okay, so some of you private messaged me afterwards and asked about the guide stick that sometimes goes in the back of your walking foot or some of your normal feet. So this is the guide stick. Let me pop that in. Okay, so we've just done a 60-degree angle sewn line here. This guide stick is to measure the distance that we need between each quilting line. So for instance, I want an inch. So I'm going to put this guide on the inch mark. So my inch mark, if I roll that up, is there. And you pop this guide down on your inch mark. I like to rest mine just above it. So it rests neatly onto the actual fabric. So the whole point of this guide is once you've done one row of stitching or marked one line, you get this guide, plug it into your walking foot, and then this guide will, bring this up a little bit there, this guide will basically run along your previous stitching or your marked line. So we are doing 60-degree angles, so my seam here is close to what would be a 60-degree angle. I'll put my foot down and my guide is going to run along that sewn line, and when we get to the 60 mark, we know this is going to hit the 60. So it's on the 60 now, going at 60. We're going to keep going on that line. So I'm using this guide now as my guide. I'm coming out at the other end. And I'm on the 60 mark there. Oh, I just knocked it. But I was on the 60 mark when I came out. And this is still on the 1 inch. Okay, so that's a brief inside of how the markings work. So as you can see here, I've kept a distance of 1 inch and it's a perfect 1 inch. This is how I get good top stitching, guys. I use all these markings here. Now, like I say, some of you have only got like 3 or 4. They're generally, like my HD9 has probably only got 3 or 4. So just use those markings there. You might not have any horizontal ones, that's fine. If you haven't got any horizontal ones, basically you can put some masking tape down for when you pivot. The 45-degree angles, I've only ever found it on the machines that with the plates that come off, but I might be they might start coming on a lot of the plates now. But use these markings, guys. These are going to help you a lot in your sewing and keeping your top stitching neat. Okay, so thanks ever so much for watching me. I'm so sorry it's pre-recorded, but it's the best I can do for today. But as promised, there I have taught you this. If you have any more questions, please pop it in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next live. Have a good day and a good weekend. Bye.